In this video, I'm going to take an extensive look back at Star Trek Nemesis, the 10th theatrical Star Trek feature film, and the fourth and final one to feature the cast of The Next Generation. Let's get started. Released in 2002, Star Trek Nemesis was directed by Stuart Baird. The story begins as the crew of the Starship Enterprise celebrate the wedding of Commander Riker and Counselor Troi. After finding an identical android to Data near the neutral zone, the Enterprise is invited to Romulus to begin peace talks with the Romulan Empire. On arrival, Captain Picard discovers that Romulus has been taken over by a younger clone of himself named Shinzon and his army of Reman soldiers. After discovering that the promise of peace talks by Shinzon is just a ruse to capture Picard and steal his blood to survive, the crew learns that Shinzon plans to invade the Federation and destroy Earth with her deadly radiation weapon. With the first three Next Generation films being written and directed by personnel who had worked for a long time in the TV series, producer Rick Berman sought out fresh blood to work on the next film. Berman was looking for filmmakers with a more substantial cinematic pedigree. Writer John Logan, who had written the script for the Ridley Scott film Gladiator, was a friend of actor Brent Spiner, who played Data, and was asked to come up with a story. Berman wanted the movie to feature a villain with a personal connection to Picard. Initial story ideas are that of a long-lost son of Picard, and a direct clone of Picard that would be played by Patrick Stewart in a dual role. Eventually, Logan came up with the idea of a younger clone created by Romulans. Initially, Jude Law was considered for the part, but after Stuart Baird came aboard the project, he wanted an unknown actor for the role. Stuart Baird at this point in his career was well known in the industry for being an editor in many successful action films, particularly for Richard Donner, on movies like The Omen, Superman, and Lethal Weapon. Baird had moved into directing movies in the 90s with the likes of Executive Decision and US Marshals. Rick Berman in particular enjoyed the sense of fun and action in Executive Decision and offered Baird the opportunity to direct Nemesis. Although Baird was well aware of Star Trek, he wasn't really a fan. Berman, possibly even at this early point looking to make his own Wrath of Khan, saw this as a positive, as he wanted someone to bring a fresh perspective on the franchise, as director Nicholas Meyer had done for Star Trek II. Since the first three Next Generation films had been brought to the screen by personnel who had worked on the TV series, there was a familiarity between the cast and crew which had been very comfortable. Stuart Baird had never worked on Star Trek before, who was an unknown quantity to the cast. While Baird had a good working relationship with most of the cast, several years later, stories emerged of the likes of Marina Sirtis, who played Troi, and LeVar Burton, who played LaForge, having issues with the director. Allegedly, Burton claimed that Baird often got his name wrong, calling him Laverne on more than one occasion. Marina Sirtis, who proved to be more vocal with her issues with Baird. In October 2014, at the Destination Star Trek convention in London, the cast were asked about how it felt filming their last movie. When Michael Dorn, who played Worf, described it as a tough shoot, Sirtis then jumped in and said, quote, "Oh, come on, the director was a fucking idiot." It's never been revealed as to why exactly Sirtis never got on with Baird. It's ironic given that this film makes much better use of Troi than the previous films, and she even plays a key part during the final space battle. In Nemesis, the Enterprise travels to Romulus to begin peace negotiations with the Romulan Empire. Despite being largely absent from the movies up to this point, the Romulans have been recurring antagonists in the Star Trek franchise, going all the way back to the original TV series in the 60s. First appearing in the TOS episode, Balance of Terror, the Romulans are depicted as a xenophobic race whose culture resembles what the ancient Roman Empire might have been like had they discovered space travel. Balance of Terror established that a war had been fought between the Federation and the Romulans, and the outcome of that war was the neutral zone, a region of space that prohibited Federation or Romulan ships from entering and which acted as a buffer between the two governments. Any ship from either side entering the neutral zone was deemed an act of war. The Romulans were revealed to be linked to Vulcans that had split off from that race in the distant past. The Romulans came close to being featured in some of the movies previously, but it's only here in Nemesis that they were finally given the spotlight. Despite being mostly set in Romulan territory, a slave race known as the Remans are the main antagonists of Nemesis. Led by Shinzon, they take over the Romulan government and act as his foot soldiers. The Reman's appearance is very unique to Star Trek, and they look like something out of a vampire movie. Like vampires, they are afraid of bright light, having come from a mine planet always hidden in shadow. Shinzon was played by Tom Hardy. Hardy was largely an unknown actor at the time, but had played small roles in Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down and the TV series Band of Brothers. When Hardy performed his audition tape for the role, he did it partly nude for some reason. When he was called to do a screen test with Patrick Stewart, he felt that his performance was, in his words, appalling. However, when Stuart Baird saw a recording Hardy made himself the night before, he had performed the scene much better, and Baird cast him as Shinzon. Shinzon is one of the most interesting and scary villains to ever appear in Star Trek. Being a younger clone of Picard, he was created as part of a planned operation to replace him to spy on the Federation. When that plan was abandoned, he was sent to the mines of Remus, where he was taken in by the Remans, became their leader, and led a revolt that eventually overthrew the Romulan government. Shinzon is a very tragic character, in that although he is extremely dangerous and cruel, he is dying and needs Picard's blood to live. Picard himself is scared not so much by Shinzon, but by the possibility he could have ended up just like him if he had lived his life.
Look in the mirror. See yourself. Consider that, Captain. I can think of no greater torment for you.
I've always liked the nature versus nurture theme of this film. To Picard, Shinzon represents what he could have become if he had grown up in the same circumstances as he did. As much as the latter half of the movie is about the two men going to war and matching their ships and tactics against each other, it's also a war of ideology. At several points in the film, Picard tries to get through to Shinzon and convince him to be a better man. But as Shinzon tells him, it's far too late.
I see what you could be. The man who is Shinzon of Remus and Jean-Luc Picard could never exterminate the population of an entire planet. He's better than that.
He is what his life has made him.
The idea of which is stronger, nature or nurture, is something that's been disputed by behavioural psychologists for a long time. In the modern era, many scholars believe that neither is stronger. Rather, genes and the environment have an interactive relationship, and that a person's environment largely affects how a gene will express itself. My own personal belief is that we are all products of our upbringing, regardless of our genetic makeup. One of the most common criticisms of Nemesis is that it's more than inspired by Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Screenwriter John Logan has said in interviews how Star Trek II was one of his favourite films, and you can definitely see its influence in Nemesis, with its main villain having a personal grudge with Picard, the creation of a new weapon of mass destruction, and the final battle between the Enterprise and the enemy ship in a dangerous region of space. However, while I acknowledge that Nemesis is definitely inspired by Wrath of Khan, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Nemesis has its own story to tell, and besides the personal conflict between Picard and Shinzon, there are strong themes of family, identity, and time moving on. This is more apparent in a lot of the many deleted scenes of the film. The cast have been vocal over the years about these scenes being deleted, but in my opinion, a lot of these, while interesting, would have slowed the film down a great deal. One scene between Data and Picard in his ready room really signposts the film's ending.
I believe my memory engrams would sense the absence of your proximity, sir. I would miss you.
And are you, Data?
Shinzon's battleship is called the Scimitar, and is one of the meanest looking spaceship designs of all Star Trek. It's about 3 times the size of the Enterprise E, which in itself is the largest Enterprise in Starfleet history. Shinzon's secret weapon is a device that emits what's called Theron radiation, and the whole ship is basically a gun port for this weapon. As intimidating as the ship looks, when at the end of the film, its Theron weapon is activated, the wings spread out and the ship looks like a giant spider. The bridge of the ship looks like a dungeon and makes a Klingon bird of prey bridge look like a kindergarten class. Also, as much as Nemesis gets criticised for its lack of originality, Picard and Data's method of escape from the Scimitar seemed to inspire the writers of Star Wars: The Force Awakens 13 years later, as Finn and Poe's escape from a First Order ship is very similar. After having composed the musical score for 4 previous Star Trek films, Jerry Goldsmith returned here for his 5th and final score for Star Trek. While many great composers have worked on the Star Trek movies, like James Horner, Dennis McCarthy, and Michael Giacchino, I think it's fair to say Goldsmith's contribution to the franchise are the most famous and recognisable. Goldsmith already had a long-time association with Stuart Baird, as he had scored the director's 2 previous films, Executive Decision and US Marshals. Goldsmith's Star Trek theme is used once again here, but he also creates a 5-note motif for Shinzon and the Remans that's interwoven throughout the score. A very noble version of this motif is used during the dinner scene between Picard and Shinzon and Romulus, which hints that friendship and peace may be possible, but a threatening version of the theme is used in the battle scenes. Along with producing some of the best action music of his career in this film, Goldsmith also brought back his Enterprise and Space Dock theme that he had created all the way back in 1979 for Star Trek the Motion Picture. Sadly, this was Goldsmith's final contribution to Star Trek, one of his last projects altogether, as he sadly passed away 2 years after the film's release. But he leaves behind a great musical legacy that will exist for generations to come. The final third of Nemesis had at this time the biggest and most protracted space battle of the entire Star Trek movie series. The Enterprise races towards Earth to warn Starfleet about Shinzon's plan to attack the Federation, but they are ambushed by the Scimitar in the Bassan Rift, a region where subspace communication is jammed. The two ships get into a massive dogfight, and even the Romulans show up to help Picard, but don't last very long. But hey, it's the thought that counts. Some have criticised this film for having a very slow build-up before the action-filled final hour, but in my opinion, that's not a negative. I like the fact that the movie takes its time and allows Picard and the audience to get to know Shinzon. Action without character development or story has no meaning. And for me anyway, because I'm so invested in the story and the characters, it makes the final battle all the more exciting. This is also where the film wears its Wrath of Khan influence on its sleeve. Both Nemesis and Khan involve a long, drawn-out climactic battle between the Enterprise and the enemy ship. Again, I don't necessarily see that as a negative. I think screenwriter John Logan was very open at the time about using Star Trek II as a model for the film. This is especially true down to the battle tactics involved. Like Wrath of Khan, the battle makes use of real ship tactics, considering Starfleet is basically a space navy. Also, I like the fact that we see the helmsman press meaningful buttons in response to orders for once. At a certain point in the battle, Shinzon beams a boarding party to the Enterprise to capture Picard, and a massive firefight breaks out between the two crews in the corridors. While this is all very well filmed and exciting to watch, this is where logic goes out the window for me. I know you have to suspend a certain amount of disbelief when watching Star Trek, as there is so much futuristic technology involved that could solve many problems, but I really don't understand the tactics involved here. There are 3 ways the boarding party could have been easily neutralised. Picard could have ordered the corridor flooded with knockout gas. He could have had the artificial gravity turned off and left the remnants float around uselessly, or just had security force fields hold them in place. We've seen all these options used before in Star Trek. On top of all that, after sending over his boarding party, Shinzon not only keeps firing at the ship his men are on, he aims directly for the bridge, and then this happens. Maybe this could be chalked up to an accident. He does somewhat apologise for this afterward.
I hope you're still alive, Jean-Luc.
Oh yes, I am.
One of the special effects highlights of the film is the Enterprise ramming the Scimitar. While the Enterprise was created mostly through computer graphics imaging starting from the last film Insurrection, a large practical model of the Enterprise saucer section was built for this sequence and rammed into a model of the Scimitar. This is one of the most spectacular scenes of any Star Trek film. After many Star Trek episodes and movies over the years of the ships being ordered to a collision course or ramming speed, it was pretty cool to finally see an Enterprise go through with it. Funnily enough, Deanna Troi is at the helm of the Enterprise when it crashes, just as she was in Generations when the Enterprise crashed into a planet. Coincidence? Despite the crash heavily damaging the Scimitar, Shinzon finally gives up on trying to capture Picard and activates his Theron radiation weapon to destroy the Enterprise. And it's here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, where the film often gets most criticism for its lack of originality. This ending pretty much rips off the climax of Wrath of Khan, with a heavily damaged Enterprise limping desperately away to avoid being destroyed by the villain's superweapon, only to be saved at the last minute by a beloved main character sacrificing himself. While all this is true, I have to say that I've never really had much of a problem with this. Despite the obvious steal from Star Trek II, this whole sequence, in my opinion, improves on the climax of that film. As much as I love The Wrath of Khan, my one complaint with that movie, and it's a big one, is that Kirk and Khan never have a face-to-face confrontation. All their interactions are over view screens and communicators. Kirk sits out the climax fairly helpless, while Spock saves the day single-handedly. In Nemesis, however, Picard is much more active. He beams over to the Scimitar by himself, takes out the remaining crew, and then has his final showdown with Shinzon. While all this is going on, with the transporter down, Data leaps from the Enterprise over to the Scimitar in quite spectacular fashion to make the ultimate sacrifice. Shinzon's death scene is actually quite sad. Picard's failure to make him see reason and be a better man really hits home. I've heard of some criticising this scene for Picard's lack of urgency, given that he has just seconds to stop the Phaedron weapon from destroying the Enterprise, and seems to freeze. To that I say, it's not every day you kill your own clone. Data shows up in the nick of time, of course, beams Picard over to the Enterprise, and destroys the Phaedron weapon by firing his phaser into it, blowing himself and the Scimitar into pieces as he does so. I don't care if this is all more than inspired by Wrath of Khan. It's all in the execution, and all the cast give great performances as they mourn the loss of their friend and colleague. Admit it, you cried. Brent Spiner, who plays Data, had actually wanted his character to be killed off in the previous film Insurrection. His reasoning was that Data, being an android, wasn't supposed to age, but Spiner, being a human actor, naturally would. Therefore, Spiner knew that he would only be believable in the role for a finite amount of time. In retrospect, I think Spiner made the right decision, and Nemesis was definitely the time for Data's story to come to an end. Data's whole story arc throughout the TV series and movies was his wish to become more human. By sacrificing himself for his friends and his crew, he made the most human choice anyone could make, and it's only fitting that his journey ended here. The movie ends with most of the crew going their separate ways. While the movie as it stands is the last one to feature the next generation, there were still certain elements left in there that could have meant that the story could have continued. While Data was dead, his twin B4 is hinted to have Data's memories. Again, this is a similar way the ending of Star Trek II was handled. Although that movie ended with Spock's death, certain elements of the ending were left vague, hinting Spock could come back, which he of course did. As far as the actual quality of the movie itself, it's for me the most underrated movie of the entire series. While its influences are obvious, the film has terrific action and special effects. The cast all give great performances, and Shinzon is a fantastic villain. While objectively speaking, I think First Contact is the best Next Generation movie, I think Nemesis may actually be my favourite, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, when Nemesis was released to cinemas in December 2002, it faced strong competition at the box office against the likes of Die Another Day and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Not only that, it was released only a week before Lord of the Rings The Two Towers came out and destroyed the competition. Nemesis only made $67 million against a $60 million budget and was officially declared a box office failure. It would be a long 7 years before the franchise returned to the big screen with a soft reboot of the classic era with the release of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek in 2009. And that's the movie I'll be taking a look at next time in this series. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already, click the bell for notifications. Let me know in the comments, what was your favourite Next Generation Star Trek movie? I hope you all look after yourselves, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye for now.